Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the second season of QubaHQ tutorials. My name is QubaHQ and the rapidly decreasing number you see in front of you is just a demo for today's tutorial and has absolutely nothing to do with my bank account, or at least that's my story and I'm gonna stick to it. Now, dealing with dynamically generated numbers in After Effects can be a bit of a pain. And that's mainly because there never really existed any unified method for formatting them. There would be an expression that helps you decide how many digits after the decimal point you want to display. There were a number of expressions that would help you add leading zeros in front. Personally, I would always forget to save those expressions on my hard drive, so whenever I had a project that had to deal with numbers that link up to either sliders or different properties, I would have to go to Creative Cow, to AE Enhancers, to motionscript.com, look for those expressions on their pages and forums, copy them, then realize that they don't really do what I want, try to combine them, and so on and so forth. Well, never again. Today I'm happy to introduce to you ÜberNumber, an expression to end all expressions. Well, at least when it comes to dealing with formatting numbers and putting all your digits in the precise order you want them to be. So let's have a quick look at the possible case where you may be dealing with dynamic numbers and the trouble you may run into. So I'm gonna disable our Uber layer for now and show you what I have set up. So apart from this kind of cheesy tech looking background, I have a controller, which is a adjustment layer. It does not render, and on it I have a slider that goes from a very small negative number to a very high negative number, right? And typically how we would deal with it is create some text, and I already typed something in here, but this is in no way dynamic right now, and create an expression on it. So let's try it. I'm just gonna expand it a little bit so it's more visible. Open up source text, alt click on it and write an expression. So first we want to hook it up to our slider. So I'm gonna say x equals and link it up to the slider. And just to avoid any trouble, I can add this. I'll say dot value and semicolon to end the line. And that's going to help me define the variable of x. Well, I don't even have to explain that. I'm sure you know that much about expressions by now if you were following these tutorials. Second line would say account colon space pound sign, close it, and then add the x as a number. And as soon as I release it, I get some nasty stuff. So let's just look what happens. I'm gonna quickly preview it. I think I hit the wrong button. And what happens is After Effects is trying to be very precise. So it starts as a number 0.01 and it ends at the right number because those are defined. But as it interpolates between them, it generates those quite long strings, and they actually carry on even behind the screen that don't really look too good. Another problem that I can see here immediately is that the pound sign is before the minus, which kind of looks weird. It looks like we're subtracting the number from the pound. And finally, once we arrived at the very end, well, with 5 digits it may be quite easy to read, but if the string was any longer, those commas would really help us out. So tidying up those decimal places so that the text only displays 2 digits after the decimal point is probably the easiest task, and we could even do it on the fly. I mean, it's as simple as multiplying the number. So x equals x multiplied by, let's say, 100. And the amount of zeros in here is the amount of decimal points you want to have. So 2 zeros, 2 decimal points. Next line would be x equals math.floor x, and that's gonna basically erase all the decimal points after we multiplied it. And then x equals x divided by 100. So again, that's the same number as before. And sure enough, as we click away, we end up with a number that has 2 decimal places. Now, you may see there is a bit of a problem in here. When we go to this particular frame, we end up with a single decimal place. And that's because the number is already rounded enough and After Effects does not want to display a 0 in here because mathematically it just serves no purpose anymore. So it's going to shorten our text and change the value. So even though this method is widely used, it's still not quite ideal. What you actually have to do is stop treating this number as a number itself, but convert it to a string, meaning convert it to a word, and treat the numbers as if they were letters. And it would be a very, very long tutorial, probably longer than the rain one, if I tried to demo all the thing live. In fact, it took me almost a whole day to write ÜberNumber expression, figuring all the stuff out step by step. So why don't we just grab this layer and happily delete it, and I'll show you how to use the ÜberNumber instead. So of course, before you can use ÜberNumber, you will need to install the preset. And if you're watching this video on either Vimeo or YouTube, check the description underneath it. You should find a link to my website, to the article about this particular tutorial. Go there. If you're already on QubaHQ, welcome. Check the description below. There should be a link to download a zip file. Inside of the zip file, there should be this FFX file. You just drop it to wherever all the good little presets go. I always forget which folder that is, but I'm gonna pop up the path for both Mac and PC in a box below right about now. And once you have it installed, you can locate it by going to Effects and Preset panel and just starting to write Uber text. Now, please note that although the title of the expression officially uses the umlaut U, in the interest of typing it quickly, I decided to go with the standard U. Anyway, so since I wanted to begin this tutorial with a little demo, I already pre-cooked the whole effect. So in order to show you step-by-step instructions on how to use it, I'm just gonna delete it right now. So let's open it up, get rid of it, and start from scratch. And this text you see right now in the preview window is not dynamic, it's an actual text. Actually, why don't we change it to avoid any confusion? So this is a text layer, which surprisingly fits in our box. That's really nifty. All right. So with my text layer already selected, and no dynamic text applied to it whatsoever, I'm just gonna double click my QubaHQ ÜberNumber to apply it, and you'll immediately see that a demo number pops in. Now this is something I just created to quickly demonstrate most of the functions of the expression, and we'll change it in a second. So let's just open up source text, unroll it a bit. We actually don't need all this preview since we're dealing with just a very narrow space in here, and you can see immediately, let me just move the cursor out of the way, that the function itself is explained in quite a detail in here. Everything from here to here you don't actually need for it to operate, and it's just written there so that you have a good reference as to what the function does. I'm gonna first recreate our sad negative account effect and then walk you through all the functions step by step. So all we need to do to make this happen is to add another line in front defining the x. So I'm gonna say x equals, and then link it up to our slider. Then replace this demo number with x to read that in, and decide how many spaces we want. So we wanted 5 digits before the decimal point, we wanted 2 digits after decimal point, we wanted the grouping by 3 digits, and we wanted the pound symbol. I hope I still have it. Yes, I still had it in my clipboard. I unfortunately don't know where the pound sign is on the keyboard, but for some reason I decided to use pound instead of dollars this time. And that should actually do it. We already have the number. Of course, we forgot about the account, so I'm just going to click here once again and just write account colon space and add it to our ÜberNumber. There we go. That's all there is to it. And if I run a preview right now, you'll see that we have all those functions working in unison. So We have a pound sign that jumps in between the negative sign and the number. We have the comma that divides and groups the number by 3-digit sections. We have a precise amount of digits before the comma and a precise amount of digits after the comma. Let's have a look at the script itself and see how you can control all these properties dynamically. Now, reading expressions off the After Effects screen is probably not the best idea, so I'm gonna open Sublime Text, which is a text editor that I use to write all my code, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's just wonderful. It color codes everything and just makes it look clean and legible. And I'm gonna walk you through what this function does. So what you're seeing in here is this is the actual kind of code view of the expression. This is how I've written it, and this is very legible. What you're gonna get is this. It's tightly packed and it basically doesn't occupy so much screen real estate, and actually what you really need is just this, so it's even smaller. But I'm leaving all these comments in here so that you have a good reference. To use ÜberNumber, you need to copy this whole thing into your source text, and you do that by applying the preset and then type ÜberNumber with the capital N and everything else lowercase, open parenthesis, and then any number of function arguments you want to. Now, you can use all of them or you can use just a subset. The thing to remember is if you, let's say, give it only 3 arguments or 4 arguments, the function will think those are the first 3 or 4 arguments. So, if you give it 1, it will assume it's just a number. If you give it 3, it will assume it's those 3. There is no way to use, let's say, just number and the leading symbol without using all the other ones. Of course, fortunately, all those arguments can be defaulted to disappear or have no effect, so you can achieve any kind of combination of those functions. So here are the arguments that go into the function. Number is basically your number, whatever you feed to it. So you can link it to a slider, you can link it to a property, or you can even type it in. It's all up to you, but that's going to be the kind of initial input that the function is going to work on. Leading digits, well, that's simple enough. If you want to have a certain amount of digits before the comma, you type it in here. Now, if you type 0, that means it's just going to use whatever amount of digits there are in the number. If you type any other number, it's gonna add zeros where necessary. Now, one important thing is it's not going to shorten the number. So if you, for example, feed it number 1000 and then declare leading digits as only 2, it's still going to say 1000 rather than just 00. So it's not going to shorten, it's not going to truncate anything before the comma. Decimal digits, on the other hand, that's going to either extend or truncate the amount of digits you see after the decimal point. You can make it as long or as short as you want. And again, if you type 0 in here, that's going to completely disable display of the decimal numbers. The next argument is called decimal symbol, and this basically helps you define how do you separate the integers from the decimal digits. So in many countries like the US, period is used to separate them. In some countries like Poland, we use a comma. So this is your chance to define what string you want to use to separate those two groups of numbers. And it could be a period, it could be a comma, it could be anything you want. It could be a whole word or a sentence, as long as it's a string. So while the number, leading digits, and decimal digits are all number arguments, this is a string, so you have to put it in double quotation marks. And if you just put 2 double quotation marks with nothing in between, it's going to default to a period. Next, digit grouping. Typically, in any case I've seen so far, we group the digits by the groups of 3. Kind of like you can see on this example. It makes it much easier to read, but I'm giving you an option to group it in any way you want. So if you type 4 in here, you're gonna get groups of 4 and so on. Then you have grouping symbol. And this is very similar to decimal symbol, so again you need to use quotation marks, and this will be the symbol that's used to separate those groups, should you choose to do that. Now keep in mind, if you put digit grouping at 0, it's just gonna ignore all the commas or whatever symbols you want to insert and not perform that function. Finally, we have the leading symbol, and that's another one that has to go inside the quotation marks, and that's going to allow you to add, let's say, a currency or some other string that you want that will go in between the minus and the number itself should your readout be negative. And that's really it. This is how you use this function, and let's just jump back into After Effects and do some examples. So, as you can probably guess from my surname or figure out from my thick accent, I'm originally Polish. So let's adapt our account story into Polish reality. I'm going to get rid of the whole account string because we don't really need it. Keep on reading the same number, but change the number of values. So first of all, we don't want to use pounds anymore. We will use PNZ, which stands for Polish New Złoty, which is the currency we use in Poland. If I click away from it, we can see that it already adapted. It looks kind of weird because of the spacing and everything being capital, but let's just stick with it. The next thing I may want to do is reverse the commas and periods. So as I said before, in Poland we use periods to separate the number into, well, periods, into groups of digits, and then we use commas for decimal points. So let's do that. Let's change our first period into a comma and the second comma into a period. Again, click away and you can see that those two are changed, and right now we have our readout running with the new system. We could actually maybe insert an extra space in the beginning just so that it looks slightly better. Yeah. So this would be kind of the international way of displaying this number. And let's say, you know, we don't really like all this leading numbers mumbo jumbo. We want to get rid of, no problem. I'm just gonna change the second value, which is the leading digits, into 0, meaning I'm gonna ignore that function. And right now it's going to make it whatever length it needs to be, while maintaining the concept of adding those periods once the number jumps high enough. So if I preview this right now, we can see that the number is no longer a constant length throughout the whole animation, but still obeys all the other rules. I kind of liked it more when it had the leading numbers. Let's add 7 of them instead. You can see everything adapts, and now we have 2 periods as we're grouping it again. Now, maybe instead of P and Z, which is the international symbol for Polish zloty, I'm gonna remove that symbol entirely from here and then just add at the end of the string a Polish way of writing it. And I see that it's not really doing the Polish weird letter L, which is L with a slash through it. Well, never mind, that's fine enough. But you can see how easy and quick it is to modify this and display the numbers in a variety of different formats. Let's try something a bit more crazy. How about we divide it into the groups of 2? Also possible. This could be a nice way of displaying telephone numbers, perhaps. We could totally remove all the digits after the comma. So the third property I'm changing into 0 and make it a 6-digit number. And then we basically have, I don't know, weird phone numbers that start with a minus. Not really sure what I'm going for in here, but I'm just demonstrating the different ways of using it. Now, the cool thing about this expression being a function is that you're not limited to a single use. You can use it multiple times, or you can modify other readouts in here. So let me just clean this whole thing up and try something else. I'm gonna apply it once again onto an empty text layer just to reset the whole thing and change my slider animation here from 1 to, let's say, I'm trying to count how many places we have. Let's say 11. This will all make sense in just a moment. In our source text, instead of the number that we have typed in here, I'm just gonna write math period pi. And that means it's gonna render out the number pi for us. And if I click away, if you ignore the dollars and the zeros, indeed that's 3.14159. Let's get rid of the leading zeros because we know there's only one digit in there. We can completely ignore the commas that separate the digits before the comma, so I can make it into an empty string. I can also turn the dollar sign into an empty string just to clean it up. And now I can link the number of digits after the comma to our animated slider. So let's do this. Let's just select number 5 and link it up here. And what this is gonna do is it will calculate different digits of pi one by one. And let's see how high can we get fitting it in here. 18. That's pretty cool. I have a feeling that after a certain number, After Effects stops calculating them. So let's just go back to, what, 15? This is good enough. And this example demonstrates something else. Note how in here, with the 3 digits, the number read 3.142. However, if we go ahead, it changes into 1.16. And that's because I included the rounding into our expression. So 6 is going to round up. As soon as we shorten it by 1 digit, the 1 turns into 2. So this is a really robust expression that doesn't only treat the numbers as a string, but also actually takes care of calculating them correctly. Now, this is pretty cool. I never did that before, and I kind of like this example. As I was saying before, you don't have to give all the arguments to the expression. You can just limit yourself to a few of the first ones. And let me see, I hope I took care of no arguments at all. What will happen? Yes, you're gonna get a not available if you decide to just run with the empty bracket. So let's try it again. If I just write math.pi and click away, it's gonna display number pi to whatever degree of accuracy After Effects deems correct, and it's probably around 16 digits or so, maybe 14. Doesn't really matter, that's the number we get. If you add another argument in here, so let's say I'm gonna add 3, that's the number of digits before the comma, so it's applying this and then continuing as it were. Let's do another comma 3, and that's going to limit the number before and after the comma into 3 digits each. And I have to consult the function arguments in here because I don't remember what's next. Next is the decimal symbol, so why don't we go with a hashtag? Doesn't really matter, we're just experimenting in here. That's gonna insert a hashtag in here, and that's kind of cool, but you know what, I'm gonna stick with the period, or actually keep it empty just to prove that it still is a period. Next one will be the digit grouping, which in this case I'm just gonna type 0 and do another close parenthesis because I don't really feel like adding any of that. And the final one would be the leading symbol, and we can write pi equals in here, and that's going to create our full equation. So until now I only shown you the examples in which we use ÜberNumber once. So let's try something that uses more than one occurrence of this number. I'm just going to add another line in here and say x equals time, all right? And then instead of our pi number, we're gonna do something that dynamically changes. So I'm gonna write math.sign x, and then perhaps leave this at 0 because we're going to have only 1 digit before the comma. Leave this at 3 and say sign equals. Does that work? Yes, and it puts a minus before that, so that may be not the best way of doing it. Let's do let's do it in here. Let's write sine equals, add the parentheses around it. I hope I'm not making it too complicated. Okay, sine equals, this is just a string, just a text, and then the actual readout of the sine function of time. And that controller no longer does anything. We can hide it. If we play it back, you can see that it changes. It goes all the way up and then all the way down and jumps into negative, right? And then what we can do is say plus, add maybe 2 spaces and write cos equals, and that's gonna be a cosine function. So plus, I'm gonna just copy this whole expression here, paste, and instead of sine, we'll have cos. So you can see that a single text line calls the function ÜberNumber twice, and you can call it as many times as you want, and for each time you call it, it's gonna generate whatever number you want, and all the variables can also change, so you don't have to apply it in the same way. Now, of course, this thing does not fit in our text so well, so maybe I'll just change sine into S and cosine into C. And then as we play it, we can see 2 different values changing. And as I said, you can repeat the occurrences of ÜberNumber ad infinitum as many times as you want. And now it's time for a bit of social appeal. If you're still watching this video, chances are you actually enjoyed the content and perhaps even plan to use ÜberNumber in your own projects. How about showing some appreciation and helping me reach a wider audience? If you're on Vimeo, click that little heart icon in the corner. On YouTube, click the like or thumbs up button. Maybe add it to your favorites. Maybe share it with other people who you think would be interested in this content. The wider audience I reach, the more sense it makes for me to create this content, which is, as always, provided to you absolutely free of charge and free of any kind of hidden fees. If you're feeling particularly generous, go to my website. There is a donation button on the right. Buy me a beer, buy me a coffee. I'll be definitely thankful. It's great to feel compensated for the work you do for the others. Otherwise, as I said, liking, favoriting, and sharing is the best thing you can do to let me reach a wider audience and make more people benefit from all these tutorials. And that's the end of the public appeal. As always, I would like to invite you to share with me any uses of my scripts, plugins, and effects in your own projects. I love to see where they end up and love to see how people find new and interesting ways of using them. But for now, I think it's time to bring this video to a close. For QubaHQ tutorials, I was Kuba Michalski, and I'll see you next time.